Hello, this is William Michael, and while I was publishing some lessons this week, I thought about our lay Dominican meeting and thought that it might be helpful to provide some audio content for anyone in the group who would like to work on their Latin pronunciation when we're not meeting, so we can possibly save time at our meetings and not need to do this. But one of the group members asked on Sunday, is there a place where we can hear these things, where we can practice these rules? And it's easy enough for me just to produce some lesson content to help group members work on pronouncing ecclesiastical Latin. So what I'll do is, in a couple of relatively short videos, I'll first go through the rules with some more detail than I'd be able to share during our meetings, and then I'll read through and comment on the prayers so that all of that can be crystal clear. So for this video, I'm just going to walk through these 6 rules in pronouncing ecclesiastical Latin. I hope this is helpful. If there's anything else I can help with respect to Latin study or pronunciation, just let me know, and I'll provide resources that we can study in our own time. So the first rule is simply a walk through the Latin alphabet. Rule number 1, we learned there are 23 letters in Latin. 23 letters in Latin, 6 are vowels. So it's very much like the English alphabet, just a couple differences worth paying attention to. We see the letters written out here, and just to hear their names in Latin, they'd be read as A, B, C, D, E, F, G or J, H, I, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, X. Here's the difficult one, Y, and Zeta. So those are the 23 letters in Latin. Y is special because it's actually a Greek letter. That name, Y, means Greek I. So it's a vowel that's just carried over from Greek, but there are 23 letters, one of them being a Greek vowel that's brought into Latin. And they look like English letters, but they have different names in Latin. Very simple. But those are the 23 letters. 6 are vowels, and you can see I've got them underlined. A, E, I, O, U. And this vowel Y is tricky to pronounce. You make the sound by rounding your lips as if you're going to say U, but then inside your mouth, you make the sound E. And when you combine those two things, it makes the sound U, which is a strange sound for English speakers, but common in some other languages like German. But those are the sounds of the Latin vowels, and what's important in Latin is it's not like English, where we've got multiple sounds for each vowel, which makes reading very difficult. In Latin, there's just one sound for each vowel, and it always has that sound. So the letter A is always pronounced A. The letter E is always pronounced E. I is always pronounced I. O is always pronounced O. U is always pronounced U. And Y is always pronounced U. Now, this is a difficult sound to make, that Y sound, so often it's just replaced by the U sound. Sometimes people will read it with the E sound, but that's really not that important. It's very rare. It's only used in words that are actually derived from Greek or brought directly into Latin from Greek. So we've got all the 23 letters. All of their sounds are the same as English consonants. There's just a couple notes worth making, which I'll make in the rules below. But you should know the Latin alphabet and be able to read the letters. It's pretty simple. Now, rule number 2, if we look at this list of letters, we look at the 23 Latin letters, we'll see that 3 English letters are not included. We'll see that the J is not included. There's no J. And we'll see that there's no V. So no J, no V, and we'll also notice no W. Besides, it's just double U, so it's not necessary. But 3 English letters not included in the Latin alphabet: J, V, and W. Nevertheless, when we read Latin, we'll often see the letters J and V in Latin texts. So what exactly is the deal with the letters J and V? They're not separate letters. That's what's confusing about them. The letter J, what we would call the letter J, is simply a different form of the vowel E. It's a consonantal form. And what that means is that sometimes the vowel E stands in front of another vowel, and when it's read, it has the force of a consonant, sort of like the letter Y in English in the word yellow. Yeah, that Y has something of a consonantal sound. So in Latin, when the vowel E comes before a vowel and it's read with that consonantal sound, that E was often replaced with this letter, which we would call this J. We see an example of this in our Lord's name. In Latin, it's Jesu, and you can see it's just the vowel E followed by the vowel E and pronounced ye. Well, that consonantal E there at the beginning of the word gets replaced by the symbol that we would call J. So that name would be pronounced Jesu, because it's really just the letter E. So that explains this letter J and why we don't see it in the alphabet, but we do see it in Latin texts. Secondly, the same thing happens with what we would call the letter V. We'll see that in Latin texts, but there's no V in the Latin alphabet. The letter V is a consonantal form of the vowel U. So it's the same concept with both of these letters. They're just consonantal forms of vowels. So if we look at the word awe, we can see that there's an U in that word that comes before the vowel E. And it's read with a consonantal sound, and so it gets replaced by what we would call the letter V, Ave, as in Ave Maria. In classical Latin, that would be pronounced as Ave Maria, Ave. But in ecclesiastical Latin, it can be pronounced Ave, just to show that consonantal sound of the vowel. So that's where the J and the V come from, and the J is just read like the vowel E, and if we see the letter V, we can read it either as an U, which it really is, or what we would call the letter V, Ave. So that's the second rule. The third rule presents the biggest challenge, and it's got to do with diphthongs. And this word diphthongs is probably foreign if you don't study grammar. It's composed of 2 Greek words. Di means two, and thongoi in Greek means sounds. So diphthongs means double sounds or 2 sounds. And in a diphthong, we have a special pair of vowels, a special pair that when we find them together in a word, we read them together as one sound. So it's 2 sounds expressed in 1 syllable. We see that there are 6 diphthongs in Latin, and these have to be memorized because when we see these 6 special pairs of vowels, we have to remember that they're pronounced as 1 syllable, The first one consists of the vowels a and e, Now, in classical or Roman Latin, this diphthong would be pronounced I. But in ecclesiastical Latin, it's pronounced e, with the ei as in the number 8, e. So classical I, ecclesiastical e. So in our prayers, in Bible readings, in hymns, it's always pronounced e. The second diphthong is oe, oe, and in classical Latin, this would be read as oi, oi. But in ecclesiastical Latin, it's read as e. So these two diphthongs, ae and oe, are read in church Latin with the same sound, e, e. The third diphthong is au. In classical Latin, it's read as au, and in ecclesiastical Latin, it's read the same way, au, au. And you can see it's just those two vowel sounds combined in a single syllable, au. The fourth diphthong is e, read as e. So we've got three diphthongs, e, and a, that are all read with the same sound in ecclesiastical Latin. We then have eu, which can be pronounced eu as one sound, eu, or as many modern people pronounce it, you. And then lastly, we, u and e are read together as we. So those are the 6 diphthongs. And again, they're important because they're 6 special pairs of vowels that when we see them in Latin, we've got to remember to read them in one syllable, not to separate them into syllables. So those are the 6 diphthongs. And the best way to learn these is just to practice reading, which we'll do later. The fourth rule has to do with changes in the sounds of the letters che and je, which in classical Latin or Roman Latin were ke and ge. So in English, we have the hard sounds of these two consonants. We have k as in cat, and we have g as in God. But in other words, we'll see this spoken with a soft sound, like in cell, C-E-L-L, cell, or in cello, the instrument, a cello. So we see in English the letter C has a number of different sounds. In classical Latin, there was only one sound. It was the sound k, always hard. But in ecclesiastical Latin, that letter ke takes on a soft sound when it comes before the vowel sounds e or e. E or e. So if that consonant ke comes before a or o or u, it's pronounced with the hard sound. If it comes before e or e, then it's pronounced with the soft sound, like cello, che, or chi. The same is true for the letter G, what we would call G. It's always hard in Latin. It was always hard in classical Latin, but in ecclesiastical Latin, it's spoken with a soft sound before the vowels e and e. And again, the best way to learn this is just by practice. So if we look, I've got some examples over here. We've got the name of the famous Roman. In classical Latin, his name would be read Cicero. But in ecclesiastical Latin, it's read Cicero. So you can see before the E sound and before the A sound, the consonant softens. It's not Cicero, it's Cicero. And in English, it's Cicero. So you can see that softening before the E and E sounds. Here we see an example with the G. This word here in classical Latin would be regina. But in ecclesiastical Latin, it's regina, because the G is followed by the vowel E. Regina, it's softened. Here in classical Latin, this word would be read as Kylie. But in classical Latin, because the diphthong AE is pronounced E, that softens the C to Celi. Regina Celi. You can see both those consonants softened. Now notice, when I say it's soft, or I should say before, This needs to be corrected here. This should be our soft before the e and e sounds. That includes the diphthongs e, and e. So in ecclesiastical Latin, we've got to remember that all of these diphthongs are read with that same sound. E, and e. So anytime that a C or a G are followed by any of these vowels, they're read with their soft sounds. Now, there are other changes that need to be learned in Latin, but they're less important, and it's really not worth the time studying them. So what I'd like to just say is there's a simple rule for these changes. They're not random. The rule is simply called euphony, which means it sounds good. The reason why these changes take place is because it just makes the language easier to articulate and more pleasant to hear. So if you say anything that sounds clumsy or it's difficult to articulate when you say it, there's probably a change in ecclesiastical Latin that makes that easier to say or more pleasant to hear. So the general rule for these changes is just euphony, whatever sounds better and is easier to articulate. The last rule has to do with how to accent Latin words, how to actually read Latin words, because when you don't get to hear Latin spoken, as none of us do, it's very difficult to figure out how these words should be spoken, how they should be pronounced. So we've got to learn this artificially. Normally we need to look words up in a dictionary and see either where they're accented, or if we understand the rules of accent in Latin, we can look to see whether the vowels are long or short to figure out which syllable should be accented. But I'll give you two simple rules. Most of the time, the default accent is on the next to last syllable, the second to last syllable. So if you're unsure, assume it's probably the second to last syllable. And we see a couple examples here. We see patris, a two-syllable word where the first syllable, which is the second to the last, is accented. Patris, that's normal. All two-syllable words are accented on the first syllable. But then we see the word tentationem, which has a bunch of syllables, but we hear that the accent is on the second to last syllable. Tentationem, tentationem, tentationem. Normally, the accent will be on the second to last syllable, and in two-syllable words, it's always on the first syllable. So that's the first and most basic rule. Now, in other words, we'll see the third to last syllable accented. The third to last. And the only reason why this is true is because the vowel in the second to last syllable is short, so it doesn't receive much attention. So here we see the word nomine, nomine. We see that E is short, so we're not going to put accent on a short vowel. So it moves to the third to last syllable, nomine. And we also see spiritus, spiritus, spiritus. And the reason why is because when we look at that second to last syllable, we see that that E is short. And we're not going to accent a short vowel. So it's spiritus. Now those are the rules that you need for pronouncing ecclesiastical Latin. Those are really the only rules I think that anyone needs to worry about. And if you work with these rules and practice, you'll have everything you need to be able to read Latin accurately. Now what I'll do in a couple of subsequent videos is walk through the prayers that are listed below. But on this video, I just wanted to walk through these rules so you can see the content of them and understand what I am expressing in some of this, which is somewhat shorthanded. But those are the 6 basic rules that we need to know to be able to pronounce ecclesiastical Latin. Now, in the following videos, we'll go through the prayers and just review these rules as we encounter them. I hope that's helpful.